If you stand alone at night and look up at the sky, a strange question often begins to form in the mind. What is all of this? These stars, this earth, this life, and us. And then another question appears, one that may be among the oldest questions in human history. Is there an intention behind all of this, or are the explanations we created simply products of the human mind? Human beings have always searched for answers. Long before science existed, before microscopes, telescopes, and laboratories, people lived under the same sky we see today. They watched the same sunrise and set. They experienced storms, illness, birth, and death. Birth and death. And naturally, they asked questions about what it all meant. But they did not yet have the scientific tools we rely on today. Imagine a scene from the distant past. Lightning suddenly tears across the sky. Thunder crashes loudly overhead. A violent storm begins. If you had no knowledge of atmospheric physics, how would you explain what you were witnessing? It would not be unreasonable to imagine that some powerful being was responsible. Perhaps a god in the sky expressing anger or power. This way of thinking is not foolish. In fact, it is quite natural. The human brain evolved to search for patterns and intentions. According to evolutionary biology, this tendency likely helped our ancestors survive. If something moved in the bushes and you assumed it was just the wind when it was actually a predator, the mistake could be fatal. But if you assumed that every movement might be caused by an agent, you increased your chances of survival. Because of this, the human mind is very good at imagining agents behind events, even when there is no real intention present. We sometimes perceive one. This cognitive tendency may help explain why early humans began imagining invisible beings responsible for natural phenomena. When ancient peoples saw the sun rise every morning and disappear every evening, they created stories. In some cultures, the sun was imagined as a god traveling across the sky. In others, it was carried in a divine chariot. These stories were not merely entertainment. They were attempts to understand the world with the knowledge available at the time. If we look across human cultures, something fascinating appears. There are thousands of religions throughout history, each with its own gods, myths, and sacred traditions. Ancient Greece spoke of Zeus and Athena. Norse cultures told stories about Odin and Thor. Other parts of the world developed entirely different spiritual systems with different deities and cosmologies. This diversity raises an interesting question. If religions were direct descriptions of a single supernatural reality, we might expect them to look more similar to one another. Instead, they often reflect the geography, history, and social conditions of the societies that produced them. Anthropologists have noticed that religious ideas frequently mirror the environments of the people who create them. Desert cultures sometimes emphasize gods connected to storms and scarce water. Agricultural societies often develop myths about fertility, seasons, and harvest. Seafaring cultures imagine powerful spirits connected to the ocean. None of this necessarily means that religious traditions lack value. They are part of human culture, imagination, and storytelling. But it does suggest that religion may be, at least in part, a human phenomenon shaped by cultural evolution. Human beings are deeply social creatures. Throughout our evolutionary history, survival depended on cooperation within groups. Groups function better when members share rules, expectations, and moral norms. Religion can reinforce these norms by linking them to sacred authority. When a rule is believed to come from a divine source, it often carries greater influence than a simple human agreement. Because of this, some researchers suggest that religion may have played a role in strengthening social cohesion. Shared rituals, beliefs, and moral narratives can bind communities together and create a sense of identity. However, science approaches questions differently. Science does not begin with sacred stories. It begins with curiosity and evidence. When a claim is made, scientists test it. Observations are repeated. Experiments are conducted. The goal is not to protect a belief, but to see whether the evidence supports it. This approach has led to remarkable discoveries about the natural world. For a long time, many people assumed that the complexity of life required direct supernatural design, but evolutionary biology offered a different explanation. Through the process of natural selection, simple organisms can gradually evolve into complex forms over immense periods of time. In this process, no conscious designer is required. Random genetic variation occurs within populations, and traits that improve survival and reproduction tend to spread over generations. Over millions and billions of years, this process can produce the extraordinary diversity of life we see today. Of course, science does not yet answer every question. Researchers are still investigating how life first emerged from non-living chemistry. The nature of consciousness is also not fully understood. Many areas remain open to investigation. But an important feature of science is its willingness to acknowledge uncertainty. When scientists say we do not yet know, they are not expressing defeat. They are recognizing that knowledge grows through continuous inquiry. When people suggest that religion may be a human invention, they are often pointing to the way religious ideas reflect human psychology and cultural history. The gods described in many traditions speak human languages, display human emotions, and care deeply about the kinds of rules that organize human societies. From this perspective, it may appear that humans created gods in their own image rather than the other way around. At the same time, it is important to recognize that belief systems can carry deep personal meaning. For many people, religion provides comfort, moral guidance, and a sense of belonging. Understanding the possible human origins of religion does not automatically erase its cultural or emotional significance. The goal of scientific thinking is not to insult belief, but to examine ideas carefully. Science asks where ideas come from, how they developed, and whether they are supported by evidence. When we look at the long arc of human history, we can see a gradual transformation in the way we explain the world. Early humans relied on myths and stories. Later came philosophy, where thinkers tried to reason about nature and existence. Eventually, systematic scientific investigation began to emerge. This intellectual journey is still unfolding. The universe remains full of mysteries. Cosmologists study the origin and expansion of the cosmos. Physicists investigate the nature of matter and energy. Biologists explore the origins of life and the complexity of living systems. Even now, there are questions we cannot yet answer. What exactly triggered the birth of the universe? How does conscious awareness arise from the activity of neurons? Could life exist elsewhere in the cosmos? Perhaps the most honest position is to admit that human knowledge is always incomplete. What we understand today may expand tomorrow. In that sense, the story of religion may simply be one chapter in the broader story of human curiosity. Early humans used the tools they had, myth, narrative, and imagination, to interpret their world. Later generations developed new tools, experiments, mathematics, and critical inquiry. Both phases reflect the same deeply human desire, the desire to understand where we came from and what this vast universe truly is. And perhaps the most meaningful response to these questions is not certainty, but curiosity, the willingness to keep asking, to keep investigating, and to remain open to the possibility that reality may be far more complex and fascinating than any single explanation we create.